Came home and opened the door after a long day at tea shop and saw 6 of my husband's relatives sprawled comfortably, waiting for dinner. I smiled sweetly, walked into the bedroom, and shut the door behind me. I had zero plans to cook. I'd already grabbed food on the way home. Imagine thinking you finally built the perfect life, a dream job, a beautiful home, the man you waited for. Then, in one agonizing moment, the person you loved, the man who cried at your wedding, looks you in the eye and tells you you're unreasonable for simply wanting your own space back. My world shattered in that moment, and it all started with an uninvited dinner party that pushed me to my absolute breaking point. My name is Clara, and I'm 34 years old. 4 years, I had what most people would call a great life. I was a pediatric occupational therapist, a job I loved with all my heart, a demanding but deeply rewarding career I'd spent 7 years training for. My apartment, it was my sanctuary. 2 bedrooms, bought with my own savings at 31, on a quiet street with a bakery, a pharmacy, and a park 3 blocks east where I used to run. It had these incredible west-facing windows that turned the living room amber in the late afternoon, and every single piece of furniture was chosen with care, a reflection of me. Then I met Marcus. He was a civil engineer, quiet, thoughtful, with a dry wit that slowly revealed itself. We dated for 8 months, and I was so sure. He was the one. We moved in together, into my apartment, and 13 months later we got married. A small wedding, my aunt's garden. He even cried a little during the vows. I thought that meant something profound. Marcus came from a big family, and I knew that. His parents, 2 brothers, aunts, cousins, they were a unit. Loud, overlapping, constantly in each other's lives with that casual intimacy you only see in certain families. I, on the other hand, grew up in a small, quiet family. At first, I saw Marcus's family as abundance. All that warmth, all that noise, all those people who welcomed me with hugs and homemade food. What I didn't realize, what slowly, incrementally dawned on me, like a room getting colder without you noticing until you're shivering, was that welcoming me into their group and respecting the boundaries of my home were 2 entirely different concepts for them. It started subtly. Marcus's brother and his wife would come to stay. First time, 2 days' notice. Second time, 1 day. The third time, I came home to their car already in my parking spot. By the 4th visit, I stopped expecting any notice at all. Each time, I'd bring it up with Marcus, calmly, precisely, the way I handled delicate conversations at work. My friend Patricia later told me I always approached things with too much care, too little force. Marcus would apologize, promise to talk to them, say they're family, they don't mean to impose. And each time, it happened again, slightly worse than before, because there were never any real consequences. Let me be specific about slightly worse. It's easy to sound petty when you're listing grievances, but these weren't small. Marcus's mother used my kitchen without asking and left it a disaster. His aunt rearranged my bathroom cabinet. Darling, it was so cluttered. So I couldn't find my own medication for 3 days. His brother's kids drew on my hallway wall with a ballpoint pen. When I gently pointed it out, their mother just laughed. Kids will be kids. And later told Marcus I'd been cold to her. Marcus relayed this to me, trying to be constructive, and I, believing this was part of marriage, tried to soften. I drew my boundaries smaller. I told myself it was my discomfort to manage. That love required adjustment. None of that was true, but I believed it long enough to let my apartment, my beautiful amber-lit space with its carefully chosen furniture, become something I was constantly hosting in, rather than living in. Then came that Tuesday in November. I'd had a genuinely brutal day. One of my young patients had a setback, meaning a tough conversation with his parents, then 2 hours of paperwork. I left work at 6:15 p.m., grabbed a tuna sandwich, and ate it in my car because I knew, with the bone-deep certainty of someone who'd been there too many times, that I shouldn't arrive home hungry. I parked, climbed 3 flights, put my key in my lock, and opened my door. And there they were. 6 relatives. Marcus's cousin, Dimitri, and his wife, Lena, were on my couch. Dimitri's mother, Galina, Marcus's aunt, was in my armchair, the one I'd carried up 3 flights myself. 2 kids were glued to the TV, volume blasting. Marcus's brother, Poda, was in my kitchen doorway holding a beer. Marcus was on the small sofa, and he looked up at me with that familiar expression, The one I'd learned to read precisely over 2 years. The look of a man who knows he's done something wrong and is banking on your decency not to make a scene. "Clara!" He stood up. "You're home. Come in, come in. Look who's here." I looked. I smiled. It was automatic, that empty smile that costs nothing. Galina kissed my cheek. Lena waved. The kids didn't even look up. Pota lifted his beer. And the kitchen, my kitchen, smelled of onions. Something heavy, something cooking that would take at least an hour. "I'm just going to change," I said pleasantly. I walked to the bedroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed in the half-dark, and took off my shoes. I just held them in my lap. The TV was still blaring through the wall. The onions were stronger now. I was exhausted. I'd spent 3 hours managing other people's pain professionally, competently. I had absolutely nothing left for the performance required of the woman who just came home to 6 uninvited relatives and is expected to be delighted about it. I put my shoes away. I changed into comfortable clothes. I opened my nightstand drawer, took out my novel, got into bed, and began to read. 14 minutes later, Marcus came in. "Hey," he said, closing the door. "You okay?" "Fine," I said, turning a page. "Are you coming out?" I looked up from the book. "No," I said. "Clara," he started. I set the book down, thumb still marking my page. "When did you know they were coming?" A pause. "This afternoon." "This afternoon," I repeated, my voice even. "So, you had several hours to call me?" "I know. I should have. And instead, you let me come home to 6 people in our living room at 6:30 after a 10-hour shift." I picked the book back up. "I've eaten. I'm going to read. You're welcome to join me. There are guests." "They're your guests," I said. "I didn't invite them." He stood in the doorway, hovering, that specific way a man does when he wants to argue but can't find the words. Then he left, closing the door. I listened as the muffled sounds from the living room settled back down. And I read my book. Let me be clear, this wasn't the fight. This wasn't the moment everything broke open. This was just a woman, utterly exhausted, reading a book in her own bedroom. The real fight was still coming. But this was a line. The first line I had drawn without immediately walking back across it, and turning pages in the amber lamplight, while onions fried in my kitchen without my permission. Something was shifting inside me that I didn't yet have words for. The relatives left around 10. I heard them go, the goodbyes, Marcus's cheerful voice, Galina's. Then the door closed. Quiet. He came back to the bedroom. I was still reading. He got ready for bed without a word and lay down beside me. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Then he said, "You were rude." I turned a page. "I was tired," I said. "And I was hungry, and I wasn't told. They're family. So you keep saying." Another silence. "Then what did you want me to do? Tell them not to come?" "Yes," I said. "Or at minimum, call me. Or ask me. Or acknowledge that this is my home too, and I get a say in who's in it." I closed the book. "Pick any of those. Pick all of them." What I didn't want was to walk into my living room after the day I had and find a dinner party I knew nothing about. "You didn't even try," he said. "You just walked away." "I'd already eaten," I replied. He turned off the lamp without responding. I lay in the dark, thinking, this isn't about the food. He knows it isn't about the food. And the fact that he's pretending it's about the food is itself a piece of information. I filed it away and went asleep. The next 2 weeks were surface normal. Marcus was a little cooler, careful, like a man who decided the situation was my fault but was too smart to say it directly. I, for my part, was pleasant, but I didn't apologize. That was new, and I could feel him registering the absence of that apology like a sound he was waiting for that never came. His family texted him more than usual. I noticed because he'd go quiet, then emerge with that bet on your decency expression. I was starting to find it exhausting. Then Galina called me directly. I was at work, so I let it go to voicemail and listened in my car at lunch. She was worried. She could tell something was wrong. She didn't want hard feelings. She hoped I understood that she and the family just wanted to be close to Marcus, and by extension to me. That it was how their family showed love. Her voice was warm and slightly wounded in exactly equal measure. I recognized that combo, warmth and wound, as a compound instrument designed to produce a specific result. She's good at this, I thought. Then, she's had a lot of practice. I texted back. Thank you for calling, Galina. I'll fine here, take care. And I left it at that. That weekend, Marcus told me his parents were thinking of visiting. I wanted to give you plenty of notice this time, he said over coffee. This time, as if the only problem before had been logistics, not the fundamental dynamic, not the expectation that my home was available on demand. Thank you for the notice, I said. Are they staying here? Just the weekend, he said. They don't want to be any trouble. And that phrase, they don't want to be any trouble, the phrase always deployed by people who are about to be tremendous trouble. Marcus, I said, I'd like us to talk about this. Really talk. Not just about your parents next weekend, but the whole pattern. I think we need a real conversation about how we handle family visits. He looked at me, an expression of a man who'd hoped for a different sentence. Okay, he said without warmth. We tried. We sat at the kitchen table, and I finally said what I'd been holding for months, specifically, and without accusation, in the measured cadences of a woman trained to communicate about hard things. I told him I loved his family, that I valued our connection, but I needed my home to be a place I could count on, not a venue that could contain anything on any given evening. I wasn't asking him to cut anyone off. I was asking for consultation, for advance notice, for the basic courtesy of being treated as a co-owner of our shared space. He listened. He nodded. He said he understood. He said he'd do better. He reached across the table and took my hand. I looked at his hand over mine, trying to decide if I believed him. I wanted to. God, I wanted to believe him, because the alternative, that this conversation would produce the same outcome as all the others, was a conclusion I wasn't ready for. So I chose to believe him, the way you choose to believe a weather forecast when you really need a clear day, with effort, with hope, and with a small practical voice in the back of your mind, noting that you should probably pack an umbrella anyway. His parents came the next weekend. They were perfectly pleasant. I cooked Saturday evening. We had a nice dinner. Marcus was warm and attentive. Maybe, I thought, maybe it actually worked. On Sunday morning, I woke at 7 a.m. to a third voice in the kitchen. Not his mother, not his father. A voice I recognized after a moment. Marcus's cousin Andre, who lived 30 minutes away and had apparently called Marcus the night before to say he was driving through. And Marcus had said, "Come for breakfast," without mentioning it to me. I lay in bed, listening to them talk in my kitchen. And I thought, very clearly, very calmly, there it is. I wasn't angry yet. What I felt was closer to sorrow, the specific sorrow of a hope being confirmed as unfounded. I had given him the clearest possible account of what I needed. He had understood, agreed, and then, the very first opportunity to practice it, he had reverted entirely to the old pattern, without, apparently, even thinking about it, which meant either the conversation hadn't registered at all, or it had registered, and he decided registering was enough without requiring any actual change in behavior. Both possibilities were bleak. One was thoughtless, the other was something worse. I got up. I went to the kitchen. I said good morning to Andre, who was a perfectly nice person and bore no responsibility for his cousin's choices. I made myself coffee. I excused myself to go for a run. I ran for 45 minutes in the park 3 blocks east, the park I had known before Marcus. And I thought about what my life looked like from the outside, and what it felt like from the inside, and how wide the gap between those two views had become. When I got home, Andre was gone. Marcus was washing dishes. He turned around and looked at me with an expression that had replaced the bet on your decency look, something slightly more apprehensive. The look of a man who's starting to realize the account he's been drawing on may be close to empty. I forgot to mention Andre was coming, he said. I know, I replied. It was just breakfast. Marcus, I said. I was still in my running clothes, hair pulled back, flushed from the cold. I'm going to shower. When I come out, I'd like to talk. Not about Andre specifically. About what happens now. What do you mean? What happens now? He asked. I mean, I think we have a problem that's bigger than logistics. And I think we need to decide together whether we're going to solve it. Actually solve it. Not discuss it, and then return to default. I went to shower, and while the hot water ran over me, I thought about the options in front of me and which one I could live with. And I thought about the word that had been forming in my mind for 3 months, gathering mass, the word I had been circling without letting myself land on it. The word was enough. The shower conversation, the one I'd promised and he'd been dreading, happened at the kitchen table again. Same chairs, same mugs, same window. But the light felt different that Sunday, harder, less forgiving. Or maybe I was just different. I told Marcus I needed him to understand something I hadn't communicated directly enough before. I'd always tried to soften the edges of the truth, thinking it would make it easier for him to accept. What I'd learned was that softening the edges just made it easier to ignore. So I was going to say it directly. Your family treats our home like a hotel, I said. Not maliciously. I don't think they mean harm, but the effect is the same. I come home not knowing who will be here. I don't get consulted about guests. When I express discomfort, I'm described as cold or unwelcoming. And when we discuss it, you agree with me and nothing changes. I held my coffee mug in both hands. That's not a logistics problem, Marcus. That's a priorities problem. And the priority that's consistently losing is me. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Not thoughtful quiet, but defensive quiet. The silence of someone sorting through available responses, looking for one that might diffuse without conceding. Finally, he said, "My family is important to me." "I know that," I said. "They've always been like this. It's how they are." "I know that too," I said. "My question is whether how they are is compatible with what I need, and whether that's something you want to work on, or whether you've decided it's simply fixed. That this is how your family operates, and I need to adjust." He looked at me. "I don't think it's fair to make me choose." "I'm not asking you to choose between me and your family," I said. "I'm asking you to choose between 2 versions of our marriage. One where I'm a full partner whose needs have equal weight, and one where I'm managing around your family's access to our space indefinitely, pretending it's fine." I set my mug down. "Those are the 2 options. I'd like to know which one you're choosing." The silence that followed was even longer. Outside, a bus went past. Someone's dog barked twice. Marcus looked at the table. I looked at Marcus, and I felt, with a clarity that was almost peaceful, that I was about to find out something I hadn't known for certain until this very moment. He said, "I don't think you're being reasonable." There it was. Not, "I hear you, and I want to do better." Not, "You're right, and I've been taking you for granted." Not even a negotiation, a counteroffer, an attempt to meet me somewhere in the middle. Just, "I don't think you're being reasonable," which wasn't a response to what I'd said. It was a verdict on me, the person who had said it. "Okay," I said. "Okay," he repeated, confused. "I needed to know where you stood," I said. "Now I do." I got up, rinsed my mug, went to the bedroom, and called my friend Natasha. She'd been hearing my version of the story in installments for months. She answered on the second ring with that specific alertness of someone who'd been waiting for this call. "Tell me," she said. And I did. Natasha had a spare room. She offered it before I'd even finished the second paragraph, in the decisive, no-nonsense way of a woman who'd watched a friend diminish and had been quietly preparing her response. I told her I wasn't ready to move, that I needed a few days to think. "Fine," she said. "But the offer stands, and it doesn't expire." Instead of moving, I did something I'd learned from years of working with families in crisis. I documented. Not aggressively, not with hostility, just carefully. I wrote down the dates and details of the last 6 months of uninvited visits. I noted our conversation about the pattern and Andre's breakfast. I wrote down what Marcus had said to me that Sunday. "I don't think you're being reasonable." I kept the notebook in my bag. I also called my father that evening. My father, unlike Marcus's family, always called before he visited, usually 2 weeks in advance, always framing it as a question. He was a retired accountant with a quiet manner and a talent for identifying the structural problem beneath the surface problem. When I told him what was happening, the full version, not the softened one, he listened without interrupting. Then he said, "The apartment is yours." Not a question, a confirmation. "Yes," I said. "You bought it before the marriage?" "Yes, and the mortgage is in your name." "Yes. We've been splitting costs since he moved in, but the deed and the mortgage are mine." "Good," he said quietly, the word landing like something being set firmly on a table. Keep that in mind. I did. The week that followed had the strange, vivid quality of days you know are going to matter. Marcus and I moved around each other with the careful politeness of two people who had said real things and were waiting to see what those real things produced. He didn't bring up Sunday's conversation. He didn't apologize. He wasn't unkind, just absent, retreating into his routines as a form of defense. Doing the dishes, watching his shows, going to work. Staying in the shallow register of daily life where nothing important could be said or decided. I went to work, saw my patients, came home, made dinner, ate it, cleaned up. And every evening, sitting at the kitchen table with the amber light, I thought, how long can I do this? Not as a dramatic question, but genuinely, practically. How long can I maintain this version of my life before it costs me something I can't get back? On Thursday, Galina called again. This time I answered. Clara, she said, warm and immediately purposeful. I've been thinking about you. Are you and Marcus all right? We're navigating some things, I said, which was true and revealed nothing. I spoke to him, she said, and something in my chest went tight. He's very hurt, you know. He feels like you've been pulling away from the family, like you don't want us around. I held the phone and breathed. Galina, I said, what did Marcus tell you? Just that things have been difficult lately, that you've been unhappy about family visits. Did he tell you that he and I had a conversation last Sunday about what I need from our marriage? A slight pause. He mentioned there had been some tension. Did he tell you what I said during that conversation? Another pause. He said you felt the family visited too much. I told her, very calmly. I said I needed to be consulted before guests came to our home. I said I needed to be treated as a partner in this marriage. Those are the things I said. The fact that Marcus summarized that as me not wanting the family around is itself informative, don't you think? Galina was quiet for a moment. Then, in a slightly different tone, still warm, but with something harder underneath, a note of authority that her warmth had been covering like a tablecloth on an unfinished table. Clara, you married into a family. That means adjustments. Yes, I said. It means adjustments from everyone, including me, which I have been making. And including Marcus, which he has not. He loves you very much. I believe that, I said. Love and accountability aren't mutually exclusive. She said, you know, it would mean a great deal to all of us if you came to the family dinner on Saturday. It might help smooth things over. I noticed the word smooth, the way it implied that the surface was what needed work, not the crumbling structure beneath it. I'll think about it, I said. Thank you for calling, Galina. I hung up and sat for a moment in the quiet office, the afternoon light fading outside. Marcus called his aunt before he talked to me again. He went to his family with our conflict before he came to me with an apology, which meant that whatever sorting he was doing in his private internal life, he was sorting it in their direction, not mine. He was triangulating, bringing his family into our marriage to manage a conflict that existed in our marriage, because managing it with his family present was something he knew how to do, and managing it alone with me was something he apparently did not. I drove home that night and did not stop for a sandwich. I was not hungry. I sat in the parking lot outside our building for 15 minutes instead, looking at the lit windows on the third floor. Our windows, amber and warm. And I thought about the life on the other side of those windows, and whether it was still the life I had planned to live. Inside, Marcus was making dinner. Pasta, my favorite kind. There was a glass of white wine on the table at my place. He looked up when I came in with an expression that was attempting warmth, but running slightly thin at the edges, like paint over a surface it wasn't quite sticking to. Galina called me, he said. She said you talked. We did, I said. I put my bag down and hung up my coat. She thought the Saturday dinner might be a good idea, a chance to. Marcus, I said. I sat down at the table. Did you tell your aunt about our conversation before you spoke to me again about it? He was quiet. Because I want to understand the sequence, I continued. We have a conversation Sunday morning where I tell you what I need. You say I'm being unreasonable. Monday through Thursday, you speak to your aunt about it. She calls me Thursday to suggest I come to a family dinner to smooth things over. I looked at him steadily. At what point in that sequence did you plan to come back to me? His jaw tightened. I was thinking about it. You were managing it, I said. With your family, which is what you always do. You don't bring it to me. You bring it to them. And then they come to me with a solution that happens to involve me being more available to them. I picked up the wine glass and held it. That's not a marriage, Marcus. That's a system I happen to be living inside of. He was quiet for a moment. He just looked at me. And what I saw in his face was not the bet on your decency expression, and not the apprehensive one. What I saw was something raw, and I want to be fair, I think it was genuine. I think he looked at me in that moment and saw, perhaps for the first time clearly, the gap between what he'd been offering and what I'd needed, and the length of time that gap had been open. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought he might say the thing that could have changed the direction we were moving. He said, "I don't know how to make you happy." I put the wine glass down. "I know," I said. And that was the saddest thing I said in the whole conversation, because it was true. And because it was not an accusation, but a diagnosis. And because I understood in that moment that not knowing how to make me happy and not being willing to try were, for Marcus, functionally the same thing. I ate the pasta. It was good. I told him so. We watched something on television. I went to bed, and he came to bed later, and we lay in the dark like two people who have run out of sentences, which is its own kind of answer. The family dinner was Saturday. I did not go. I told Marcus Friday evening that I was going to pass on it, that I had some things I needed to take care of, and I hoped he had a good time. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once, the nod of a man who has lost the argument but isn't ready to say so, and went without me. I heard him leave at 6:15 p.m., and I sat in the quiet apartment and felt the specific piece of a space that was, for a few hours, only mine. I called Natasha. I called my father. I made tea and sat in the armchair, the one I'd carried up 3 flights, and looked at the amber light, which had no loyalty to anyone and was simply itself. And I let myself think the thought I had been circling for weeks. I wanted him to leave, not out of hatred, not out of desire for revenge or the satisfaction of punishment. I wanted him to leave because I was 34 years old, and I had built a good life that I was good at living. And somewhere in the course of a marriage that had seemed like abundance and had turned out to be a slow dispossession, I had lost the particular quality of ease I'd had in this apartment before he moved in. And I wanted it back. I wanted to come home to a space that was mine, and know that it would be mine when I arrived. I wanted to make a cup of tea without doing math about who else might be here. I wanted the dish cabinet and the bathroom and the armchair and the west-facing windows in the late afternoon to be simple again, to be just what they were and not a negotiation. I wanted my life back. And sitting in the quiet apartment on a Saturday evening while my husband ate dinner with the family that had eaten mine, I understood that wanting it was not enough. I would have to do something about it. I spoke to a lawyer on Monday. My father always has a name, and he had one for this. I called from my car at lunch, explained the situation, and had an appointment for Wednesday. Her name was Vera Soilova, and she had the precise, unsentimental manner of someone who deals in facts rather than feelings. I brought the documents I'd assembled, the deed in my name, the mortgage papers, the spreadsheet of shared household expenses I'd been keeping for 2 years without entirely knowing why. She went through them efficiently. Then she looked up and said, "You've been thorough." "I've been careful," I said. She nodded as though those were the same thing. She explained my position. The apartment was legally mine, unambiguously, documented in every relevant way. Marcus had no claim to it. Our financial entanglement was limited to shared accounts for joint expenses, accounts that would need to be addressed, but contained no significant assets either of us would dispute. The situation was, in legal terms, clean. What it would not be was easy, or fast, or comfortable. "Are you certain?" she asked, before we went any further. "I've been certain for 3 weeks," I said. "I've been waiting to make sure the certainty was real and not just reactive." She nodded again. "Then let's talk about what comes next." What came next began on Friday evening. Marcus came home from work at 6:30. I was in the kitchen, not cooking, which was the first thing he noticed. The absence of dinner. The cold stove. Me sitting at the table with my hands around a cup of tea and a folder on the surface in front of me. He looked at the folder, then at me. Something in his posture shifted, the way a person's body adjusts before the mind fully processes what it's looking at. "Sit down," I said, not unkindly, just directly. He sat. I told him what I had decided. I told him I had spent 6 months trying to have a conversation that would produce a different outcome, and that the conversation had produced the same outcome each time. I understood now that this was not a failure of communication, but a reflection of our actual incompatibility. I told him that I wanted him to move out. I told him the apartment was mine, and had always been mine. That I wasn't asking him to leave my life. That was his choice to make, but that I was asking him to leave my home. I told him I'd spoken to a lawyer, that the process was straightforward, and that I wanted to handle it with dignity and as little damage as possible. He listened. He was very still. When I finished, he said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "Is this because of my family?" I thought about how to answer that. "It's because of us," I said finally. "Your family is the place where us became visible. But the problem isn't your aunt or Dimitri or Galina. The problem is that I have been telling you what I need for months, and you have consistently chosen not to hear it. Not because you're a bad person. Because hearing it would have required you to do something difficult. And doing something difficult where your family is concerned is something you're not able to do. And I cannot build a life with someone who is not able to do that." He said, "You could have tried harder." "I tried for 6 months," I said. "I tried with conversations, and with patience, and with adjustments, and with giving you the benefit of the doubt when the doubt had run out. I am done trying in a direction that doesn't go anywhere." I paused. "I don't want to fight about this. I'm not angry. I'm just finished." He looked at me for a long time. His face was doing several things at once: grief, and anger, and the specific wounded pride of a man who has been told a thing he cannot argue against. Then he stood up, pushed his chair back, and went to the bedroom. I heard the sounds of things being moved, the wardrobe opening. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea, which had gone cold, and listened to my husband pack a bag. He left that night to stay at his brother's. He kissed my forehead at the door, which surprised me, and said, "I'm sorry I wasn't better." And I looked at him and thought, me too. I genuinely thought, me too. The weeks after that had a strange quality, sad and quiet, and also, underneath the sadness, something that kept presenting itself when I wasn't guarding against it: relief. It arrived in the mornings first. I would wake up and the apartment would be still, and the light would come through the west-facing windows in its amber way. And I would lie in bed for a moment and know, with the clean certainty of something restored, that nobody was going to come through the door today without my prior knowledge. That the kitchen was mine, and the bathroom cabinet was mine, and the armchair and the linen closet and the Saturday mornings were mine. It was a small thing, in the way that breathing is a small thing. Unremarkable when present. Its absence, the whole world. Galina called, as I knew she would. She called 3 times in the first 2 weeks, and on the 3rd call I answered. She was upset in a way that was not entirely performed. There was real distress in her voice. The distress of a woman who had watched a family she loved contract around a conflict she had contributed to creating. I let her speak. When she finished, I said, "Galina, I want you to know that I hold nothing against you personally. But I need you to understand that what happened between Marcus and me was not about a dinner or a visit or any one incident. It was about a pattern that Marcus and I couldn't resolve together. That's between us. Please don't take it as a statement about you." She was quiet for a moment. Then, with a quietness that I think was genuine, "I think we did ask too much of you." It cost her something to say that. I could hear it. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that. We haven't spoken since, which is probably what's needed for now." Marcus and I reached our legal resolution in 8 weeks, as Vera had predicted. He was not unreasonable about it. That surprised me in a good way, and made me think that the version of him I had once believed in was not entirely fictional, just insufficient for the life I needed. He took what was his, and I kept what was mine. And we signed the papers on a Wednesday morning in Vera's office and walked out into the cold street, separately, going in different directions, which is also its own kind of answer. My father came to visit the 2nd weekend of March. He drove 4 hours, arrived at noon, parked in the right parking spot because I had texted him which one was free, and knocked on my door instead of having a key because I had not yet given him one. When I opened the door, he looked at me for a moment, taking inventory in the way he does, measuring whether the person in front of him matches the voice he has been hearing on the phone. And then he said, "You look well." "I am," I said surprisingly. "Not surprisingly," he said, and came inside. We cooked together that afternoon, the way we had when I was growing up. Him handling the parts that required precision, me handling the parts that required intuition. Both of us moving around each other in a kitchen with the easy efficiency of people who have been doing this together for decades. He replaced a hinge on the kitchen cabinet that had been loose for months. He asked about my patients, and I told him about Ethan, who had had a breakthrough the week before that had made his mother cry in my office. My father listened with the full attention he has always given to things I tell him about my work. When we sat down to eat, he looked around the apartment, the amber light, the armchair, the Lisbon painting back on the wall where I had rehung it, and said, "It looks like you." "It does now," I said. He nodded once, the nod of a practical man who understands that some statements don't require elaboration. It's been 4 months since Marcus moved out. Long enough to have settled into a shape, this new life. Long enough for it to feel like mine, rather than like a temporary arrangement I'm borrowing until something more permanent arrives. My mornings are quiet. My evenings are mine to plan. I've had Natasha for dinner twice, my colleague Remo once, and my father every other weekend. And each time someone comes through my door, it is because I have chosen it, because I have said yes, because the invitation was mine to give. I am not without sadness. I want to be honest about that, because the story of the woman who reclaims her life and finds that everything is better and simpler and freer afterwards is not entirely the story I'm living. I miss certain things. Not many, but some. The sound of another person in the apartment on a Sunday morning. The ease of early love before it revealed its limits. The version of Marcus that had been possible in a different life with a different inheritance. I mourn those things at odd moments, in the way you mourn things that were always a little theoretical, with something that is not quite grief and not quite regret, but lives in the neighborhood of both. What I don't mourn is the 6 relatives on the couch. What I don't mourn is the 3 mugs set out by automatic reflex. What I don't mourn is that empty smile, the one that cost nothing and meant nothing, the one I wore like a tool. I haven't worn that smile since. I went for a run last Saturday morning in the park 3 blocks east. The park I have known since before any of this. It was early enough to be cold, the kind of pale winter cold that makes the light look clean in particular. I ran my usual loop, and then sat on a bench for a few minutes before heading back. The way I sometimes do, when I'm not in a hurry, which I often am not anymore. A dog came and put its head briefly against my knee, then moved on. 2 children argued about something, and resolved it without adult intervention. The bakery on the corner was opening. I could smell it from the park. Bread and something sweet. The kind of smell that asks nothing from you and gives you something anyway. I sat there for a while. I wasn't in a hurry. The apartment would be there when I got back. Amber lit. Quiet. Mine. Nobody would be in it that I hadn't invited. The cabinet hinge was fixed. The dish rack was where I kept it. The cedar blocks were in the linen closet, and the Lisbon painting was at the height I had chosen. And the door had my name on the lease, and the lock answered to my key. I got up and ran home. Some things, when you get them back, you understand for the first time how much they always cost. My ordinary life, the one I had before, the quiet street, the good light, the park, the bakery, the amber evenings, had not been ordinary at all. It had been something I'd built carefully over years and given away piece by piece in the belief that love required it. It does not. Love, the real kind, the kind worth keeping, does not ask for the thing you are. It works around the thing you are. It learns its way through the space you occupy without rearranging you to fit. I am learning again to occupy my own space without apology. It is going well. The door has my name on it. That is where I will leave the story, with that small, sufficient, entirely real fact. The door has my name on it, and I came home. So, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to draw such a hard line to reclaim your own space, your own peace? What was that moment like for you, and what did you learn? Share your stories and thoughts in the comments below. I really want to know.